You are listening to Community Powered Marketing Podcast, the podcast dedicated to empowering marketers to unlock the sales potential of their audience through an online brand community. Your audience is waiting. So I'm so excited today. I'm sitting with Tiffany Pegues, and she is at Church and Dwight, but I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about what your role is and the impact that your role has on the overall organization.
Yes. So I sit within the digital growth team within Church and Dwight, and I'm really proud to be a part of this organization. It's 175 plus years old. How many people can say that their companies have been around for that long? And I really love that we're continuing to grow and progress, right? So it's 175 years old, but recognizes digital is the new frontier of marketing. Hence why we have this new center of excellence. So my role within the digital growth team is to lead the digital strategies. So that's the social, influencer, search, and so many other aspects of our digital marketing. We do some of the work in-house, and then some of the work is in collaboration with some amazing partners, agency partners, and Tense is one of those partners. So really at the helm and the intersection of digital and how we show up in digital for our brands is the importance of making sure we maintain our relevancy, our reach, and our authenticity of our brands on social in particular with communities, as well as through trusted influencer voices.
Amazing, amazing. So sometimes with digital communities, because we're here to talk about community-powered marketing, sometimes with digital communities, we can discover unique consumers or find, some unique stories, some fascinating stories. Is there a story that's maybe your favorite, your personal favorite, that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I'll take it back to when I first started on my CPG brand marketing journey. And like many junior associates, I was tasked with kind of leading the social presence of a brand that I worked on at the time. And this is a brand, I won't tell you the brand, but it's well known in refrigerated dough. And we had a consumer who wrote to us frequently. And I became pen pals, essentially, with this person. So we wrote physical letters. It started at first, but it then went into the social realm. And so what I loved about that is that I had a consumer that I actually could bring to meetings. And so the person sent me a framed picture of themselves. So it was sat on my desk. I would bring this photo into meetings. And really, when I was talking about brand strategies, it was from the lens of that consumer who I knew was so passionate about refrigerated dough in particular. And what floored me was that this became a thing. And so people started to send us their tattoos, right, that they would get of the mascot for this brand. So that's when I realized that there's power in harnessing consumer energy around communities and really, making sure that we're amplifying those communities and the voices of those communities in our internal meetings and overarching marketing efforts.
I love that story, and it's so true. Like just being able to have that relationship with that one consumer, knowing that then it gets scaled. So we've heard you talk about the flywheel of advocacy. Would love to talk about community. What role do brand communities play in the flywheel of advocacy?
We know that it's really important to have authentic voices, right? In order to really reach consumers, and there's so much coming at consumers every day, so many messages, that the way you really seed a brand is by harnessing on kind of a message that really makes sense and is relevant to that community. So that's what I think of when it comes to the flywheel of advocacy, of how do you kind of seed messages that really resonate with a particular audience, that then they will naturally do the work for you, and kind of taking those messages and sharing it with their family, their friends. Oftentimes we do it through the use of influencers, right? So influencers, especially the micro influencers, and nano influencers, are building communities that start with their family and their friends. And so really it's about making sure that those are the voices we're using and eventually scaling them, yes, with macro influencers, but in such a way that then they want to carry your message for you.
And they get to do the work for you, which I love that piece of it.
Yes.
And it's authentic because they're absolutely fans of the brand, and that's that advocacy component of it. So we're going to just shift conversations a little bit. I'm hearing, and we read about this often, and I know we've talked about it, so many marketers are concerned about losing brand fans in social because the algorithms change all the time, and it's hard to keep up with the changes in the social media algorithms. How has Church and Dwight, or how have you handled that in the role that you're in?
So I think there's two parts to this question. I think the first part is we live in a cancel culture, right? That's the biggest fear of any brand, is that they find themselves in headlines. So there's an element about reputation management. And I think there's the aspect of working with trusted voices from an influencer perspective that minimizes, right, the risk. And then I think there's another part to the question where we really try to stay close with our trusted partners. So having those frequent conversations with, the trusted social partners of the world, our reps, and staying abreast of the changes. But I honestly believe it starts with ourselves. Like, we as individuals have to be a part of the ecosystem. We have to live it. We have to breathe it. We have to be within the communities of the brands we know and love. And so I think that helps you too stay abreast of the changes, because there'll oftentimes have been situations where we're bringing changes to the algorithm that we've observed to the attention of our partners and saying, hey, why is this happening to me? So I remember, for instance, there was a certain type of content I remember not seeing on my feed, and I was really surprised by it. And it happened when it was women of color who maybe were fuller figured, and they were sharing lingerie. So it's content that maybe I was looking to opt into, wasn't seeing it on my feed, and learned some things about the algorithm. And so really it was about challenging kind of them in the way it's seeing the algorithm, and having conversations about what should be allowable, suitable content versus non-suitable content.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing, it's really two sides, right? It's that being, as a brand, ingrained, right? Ingrained in those communities, ingrained with the consumers in an authentic and relevant way. And then it's also touching base with the different social platforms and making sure that you're staying on that pulse as well. So we know there are so many times new platforms are emerging, and some stay and some don't. How do you think about evaluating these emerging platforms, and which ones do you decide to dive in or dip your toe in?
So funny enough, I feel like a new platform is born every day. Right? It's like a gold rush moment. We were talking about Colorado mining towns earlier, and I feel like this is kind of the gold rush moment of social media marketing. So again, there's a lot of prospecting happening. Mm-hmm. And I think it's about mining for insights. So looking at the world around you, what are the communities that your Gen Z cousins or children are engaging in? What are they talking about? And that's where I think social listening comes in, whether it's in context of that platform or even just from a macro perspective, looking up and seeing what's capturing people's hearts and minds and attention, right? Their share of screen time. It's looking at downloads of different platforms. Also, news articles play a role, right? Mm-hmm. So funny enough, sometimes you don't want to have a moment where a senior leader comes to you and they've heard about a platform and you don't have a POV on it, right? And so I think we're always trying to fail fast, test small, if you will, with different platforms, should we feel like they meet a certain level of heat around them.
Yeah.
So there are many platforms that we are constantly testing and evaluating that we choose not to scale, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another part of this. You have to be okay with that, because not everything is meant to be the next blockbuster platform.
Right. And just not only the platforms, but I'm amazed by the trends, right? The trends that happen on these platforms, and staying abreast of that as well.
Yeah, and one thing too, you spoke about trends. I mean, trends can happen in a very short amount of time, but then some trends you can extend the life of. And so for brands, I'd say don't be afraid to experiment with trends. I know it's scary, but you can do it in a way that you can feel good about from kind of a brand equity perspective. And so I'll take like Roman Empire as an example. It's a trend that was very popular a few months ago, And maybe there's still, an openness to experiment with that trend for your brand. And don't be afraid to, because you'd be surprised that sometimes trends do take a while before they cycle out. And that's okay for you to experiment and test with those.
Yeah, I love that. I love that suggestion as well. One of the advantages that we hear often of having a brand-owned community is that you can have this direct relationship with your consumers. And so from your perspective, why do you believe it's important that brands own that consumer relationship at the end of the day?
So, well, I'm going to say something maybe a little controversial, but it's important to own this relationship because we don't own our brands always, increasingly. And I think of them as living, breathing organisms. So they're out there for consumption with consumers, and consumers will adapt them as they need to and as they want to. So I think about, the recent phenomenon of Stanley tumblers. And really that came from a brand who was doing their listening. They stumbled across, I think it was a mommy blogger who was embracing the product in a new and different way. And they didn't run away from that. They embraced it. And they thought about how can we make this even more relevant to this particular consumer segment. And so they started to experiment with colors, with sizes, with limited editions, right? And so these are all things that were very relevant to that new consumer group. And so really my answer is, how can you use social to embrace what you're hearing from consumers? And then, mold it as you deem appropriate with that two-way living, breathing conversation, because it's really the richness is in the insights.
Yeah, it's amazing how powerful the consumers are, that they can actually build a brand, create a brand. And so they are the ones at the end of the day, like we've talked about, they own the brand, even though the marketers like you and I are like, no, we own the brand, but they are really powerful. So listening to them is super, super smart to help you innovate and of course stay ahead. So we always talk about this, marketing does not take place in a vacuum, which we love. And the community or brand-owned community is a place for always-on consumer feedback and consumer insights. Can you talk a little bit about how the voice of the consumer has really impacted other departments, so outside maybe your digital teams?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when we think about some of our internal social tools, our R&D team, our constituents of those tools, even more so than maybe members of my team, right? And I think the richness that they're getting from that is how can they think about new product ideas, product renovation ideas. Maybe it's with pricing of things we could take out and remove from the product. And so I think there's so much richness from mining not only just social, also consumer reviews as well come into play, but really think about it. It's the community at the end of the day. It's real people who have invested enough to, leave a comment or a like or a review and share it with you. And so I think about that as being really critical, even in terms of how we think about kind of new brands or new products within brands, going beyond just the R&D team might be the supply chain team, right? There's so many ways you can go with what consumers are telling you. And so we think about digital as a team sport, and I'll extend that to social really, of the more we have who are invested in it, who are really leaders in it, the better off our brands will be.
I love that. I love that perspective. So we have partnered with Church & Dwight for years, and Church & Dwight has invested and grown the work that they've done in community and community-powered marketing over the past 8 years. But a common challenge we hear, and you and I have talked about this, is how do you explain and justify these investments in digital and social in this ever-changing market? So how are you explaining to leadership what the value is or what the impact can be of these investments that you're making, because the market is always changing?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about the digital influence of sales. And so what that means is, yes, it's important to align on KPIs that are very much digitally, socially specific. But then branching out when we're, working with our executives, it's about storytelling, right? Painting a picture for them that they can understand. And so, yes, it's important to make sure we're meeting all of our social KPIs. It's equally as important to share relevant sales-based KPIs as well. And so how can we kind of paint a picture of the traffic we're driving to our favorite retailers, or the amount of clicks that we're realizing on a certain campaign that link to add to carts, or drive purchase intent rate, right, with brand lift or sales lift studies. So again, I think it's about orchestrating the information in a way that gains the hearts and minds of who we're trying to reach and tells the full story from an art and science perspective.
Yeah, and we've talked about this as well, that because of digital and obviously the world that you live in, there are so many metrics, right? We can capture so much data. So are you seeing anything else, any other trends when you're really explaining the value of the work that you're doing? Are there any other trends that you're seeing as well in measurement or in showing results?
Yeah, so I think what we're trying to do is really start with the end in mind. So really aligning kind of as, a cross-brand team, cross-digital team on what are the key questions we need to answer and how can we best leverage our use of digital to get those questions answered, to your point, because there's so much richness in the data we can obtain. And so then it's about creating sort of measurement plans as we go along across the year. And again, everyone's invested because it's helping kind of answer macro brand questions that we can all really feel good about, because it's helping to build the brand and leave it in a better place than we started. So that gets me really excited in some of the magic that comes together as we tackle these big, meaty questions. And we can do that with digital and all the data that's available.
Love that. I love that. So what would you recommend to a brand marketer who was going to support and champion starting a brand-owned community to their leadership team? What would you say to them? Like, how should they tell that story to their leadership?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is start small, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to require, financial investment in the upfront. Sorry, Sue. You probably don't want me to say that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. No, I mean, the reality is that we have brands that work with us that graduated from Facebook or Instagram, because why not, right? Like, why not test it and see? Or maybe your audience is already there talking about you and we're just finding them. And you get to a point where you then do need a budget and you grow and you need more resources and you need software. So it totally makes sense. Like, you do not have to start and build this massive platform and say, I need 10 million people on it. I love some of these startup brands, and Church & Dwight knows them well because they've acquired them. And I love that they actually had super fans first.
Yes.
And then they graduated to a platform like ours.
Yeah, it's how do you cultivate that community of super fans and then scale them, right? So you can identify the next 50,000, 100,000, hopefully get to millions of super fans, right? And I think that's where this idea of not being afraid, right, to try it, because it's time intensive, yes, but it's so rewarding. And I think as quickly as you can get kind of those quick wins from your community efforts, that's how you continue to build the business case.
So is there anything that you would say, like picturing yourself back in your early days of starting in digital, that a brand marketer should say to their management team or leadership team to really make that argument, to make the leap from sort of the social channels to investing in a software or grabbing a partnership or partnering even with your agencies?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll say tactically, I think it's about how can you share what insights you've learned from the community and have that an always on drumbeat of any of your communications to your executive team, right? Showcase the richness that's there. Even do some cost analysis of it would have taken you X amount of dollars to get this insight from your current tools, but you were able to get it for this amount via social, right? That's a really easy, tangible way for you to start to build the case.
Yeah, love that. I love that. So just a couple more questions. When we look at 2024, we're just early in the year right now, which I love. 24 is my lucky number, so I'm super excited. We're fresh.
Year.
It's going to be a great year. When you look at 2024, what are you seeing there? What do you believe are going to be some of the trends for 2024? What are some of the challenges? So both challenges and opportunities, and start with either one.
Yeah, so I'll start with the opportunity, right? So we're on a positive note, and I've said this in the past. I'll say it again. Content is queen. Want everyone to know that. But the flip side of that content is queen is how do you get fit for purpose for platform content, right? How do you make sure that the video content you're producing on one platform is as relevant as the video content you're producing on another? Because I'll give you all a hint. Oftentimes what works on one platform falls on its face on another one, right? And that's really stressful because if you think about maybe 10 years ago, we made one beautiful ad and you could put that on linear TV and it was great. It performed, it drove sales, it did all these amazing things. And now you're asking your brands, your creative agency, your production teams to create maybe a unified concept with 5 to 10 different assets. That's really challenging and difficult. So I think it's really important to first be clear on your media plan and how you intend to utilize the content. And then from there, investing in a strategy. And if you need to, then prioritize those platforms that make the most sense for that video, because it's quite intensive to get unique video content for the various platforms.
And dangerous to use, to your point, the same content across all platforms because it's so transparent. Consumers are going to know and the relevancy is lacking and it's not going to actually help your brand. So making sure that you understand what the audience is and the type of format and content for each of those platforms is critical.
Yes.
And I love that content is queen.
It's the queen. Yeah. So then kind of a challenge that I'll also add is, again, social commerce, such a hot topic.
Yes.
And we've seen some really interesting things in the US from one particular platform about driving discoverability. And there's even a hashtag around this phenomenon of TikTok made me buy it. But I think the reason why I'm raising social commerce is because some of the opportunity lies for D2C brands that we don't see for traditional CPG brands that are non-D2C. And so I think we as an industry will be in this conundrum of how to drive that sale or the digital influence of that sale that's attributable for a CPG brand that kind of lives in, yes, it lives online on .coms, but also in brick and mortar. So that'll continue to be, I think, a challenge for maybe the non-D2C brands.
That makes sense. And I think to your point, social commerce is growing. It's obviously there's more brands out there, so the attention is challenging. So how do you get in front of the right consumers for it? And then obviously, again, staying ahead of the trends. TikTok made me buy it. Obviously, other brands want to get on that and figure out how they can take advantage of that social commerce on those particular platforms as well.
Exactly.
So I love that you said content is queen. And as you know, recently my company was acquired by Tint, who are certainly specialists in capturing authentic voices through user-generated content and ratings and reviews. And so I would love for you to just talk about, from your perspective, when I came to you and said, hey, we are now Tint. You've got a community platform and you've got UGC and we're together as one. What you thought of that?
Yeah, I thought about it as fuel, right? So much of our social outreach is dependent upon user-generated content. And so speaking of content being queen, there's a lot of pressure on us as kind of community managers to deliver. And we can't deliver really without those trusted, authentic voices and the consumers kind of helping to amplify our messages. So that's really what comes to mind, is this is an enabler to this idea or expression that content is queen, and how do we jumpstart some of our content with user-generated content.
So I know you've talked about this non-linear funnel. I'd love you to explain that more to our audience.
Yeah, so I think, traditionally we've thought about the funnel and consumers, having awareness of a brand, then moving into consideration of that brand, using many different inputs to eventually convert. One of the things that I think is so compelling, given our conversation about social commerce, though, is this idea that you can go from discovering a brand on social media through your favorite influencer to purchasing it literally in minutes, sitting on the couch, right? I did that the other night. And you could go from awareness to conversion so quickly, right? And that's powerful. And so I think that's what's on my mind of how do you, as a brand, be a part of that and, you know, scale your brand via this nonlinear funnel that goes very quickly through steps that used to take weeks or months
or years,
years in a traditional perspective. But now, because of digital, is greatly expedited.
Yeah, it definitely talks to the point, certainly in social with paid influencers, but it also talks about the point with most of the brand communities that we help marketers build are unpaid consumers, right?
Yes.
They're the people that spend their own money. They love your brand or they've discovered your brand and the power of their voice to their small circle, right? So maybe it's not 1 million people, but you could have hundreds of thousands of consumers talking to their small circle and can have an incredible impact as well.
And you know, Sue, I think of them as nano influencers, right? And sometimes your community of your family and friends and your maybe 100 followers, you are more influential than, you know, any external voice would ever be to that community. So much power with kind of the everyday person. And honestly, that's what is so exciting about social, is that the power is in the hands of the many. It's not just kind of this certain elite group that gets to control messages and discovery. And it's for anyone and everyone to be a part of it.
You know, when I think about the brand communities, one of the things that I love is working with smart marketers like yourself. And I love, even in Church and Dwight, we've got, you know, lots of communities that I learn from the marketers how they tap into it or how they challenge the members or how they really listen to them. Is there anything that you're seeing or would love to see one of the brands leverage the community for that maybe they have or haven't already?
Yeah, so I think increasingly we can leverage it for more omni-channel experiences. So a few examples come to mind, you know, like how do we have this extension of what we're doing on social via what's happening in communities. So I think about a brand that might do an experiential event. And then how can you leverage that out-of-home event and bring that back into the community and challenge them to maybe go into store near that experiential to drive sales? Or if we're running a digital coupon, how do you leverage that digital coupon within the experience and again drive this more seamless transition from the offline to the online experience for the consumer?
I love that. You know, I worked many, many moons ago before starting this company. I had worked for an event marketing company and we were not capturing the consumer. So we would send out or deliver, give out 10 million samples in a weekend. And it was just this missed opportunity because the moment they tried your product, you should be following them and the journey. And again, this is going back 15 plus years.
Probably harder to do that.
Harder to do then. But I love that now the marketers we work with think about that. How do they get that consumer at any touch point to opt in? So is it, if they've clicked on the coupon, are they capturing that so they can follow them and continue to follow up on that journey? If they're in the community, are they asking them why? Why are they joining? And if they're at store and they're sampling, is there a QR code? Is there something for them to opt in? So I love that marketers today are really thinking about how do we connect with that consumer so we can continue that one touch point that they came in at.
Yeah, and then challenging them and incentivizing them for certain behaviors is also a really critical piece, right? So once we've captured them, how do we challenge them to do more with the brand? And, you know, for the hurdle of some of the activity, how do we really delight them and excite them with new and interesting things?
Yeah, love that too. One of the reasons a lot of marketers come to us is for ratings and reviews, right? Because they have this audience, and you see it in social as well, that loves their brand, has definitely purchased their product, and is willing to, unpaid, to write about it. And that review at scale can create conversion. So what's...
And can create the flywheel.
Yeah, and create the flywheel.
Earlier.
Yeah, and create the flywheel. So... I don't know if there's any changes happening in ratings and reviews, but I certainly love that it continues to be a really important part of the digital marketing ecosystem.
So one thing I was going to say is I think that's how, we stumbled right upon your services in a certain way, in that some of our brands are so beloved that we just get this flood of DMs with these super users saying, I want to learn more about your products. I want to do something for your brand. And now we have an area to harness that collective passion and energy and to really elicit ratings and reviews, which are super valuable for us for many different reasons. It's for the insights you discuss. It's for the algorithms on some of the platforms, right? And so I think that gets me so excited that we can just take the energy that we naturally are receiving from consumers and harness it for something where we can build collectively together for the brand.
Obviously, we're focused on Gen Zers, but what's next is Gen Alpha. Are there already, because it moves so fast, are there already conversations or strategies that have to happen today around that?
You know what's so interesting? About a year ago now, one of our partners came to us and said, hey, I know Gen Z is top of mind, but we need to start thinking about how Gen Alpha may be similar to or different from Gen Z. And at the time, I have 2 Gen Alphas, and I was like, what? I don't want to think about people marketing to my kids. But then I thought about it, and I was like, actually, they're right. In that, I'm sure every generation is so different. And so it is important as marketers to stay ahead of what's happening and to have, a line of sight of where you may need to go from a generational perspective to maintain that brand relevancy.
So we obviously are being challenged from consumers, from the marketers, to really think about how AI is going to help when it comes to brand communities. And certainly we're already leveraging it in Tin's platform with user-generated content, bringing forward the best content, saying, I want something that looks alike this content, and bringing that forward as well. So helping really distill down the best or most relevant content. What trends or what are you hearing when it comes to AI and digital?
Yeah. So I truly believe that this is the next frontier. It will kind of revolutionize productivity within marketing for us, especially from a content creation, from a copywriting perspective. And so this is where I get excited. So I recently created an internal video using a tool. And this same video a few months ago took me like an hour to create. Took me 10 minutes.
Wow.
I felt like I had like my whole day back. It was amazing. You couldn't tell me anything. I loved the video. It was great. Not to toot my own horn, but beep beep.
Yes.
And I was just so amazed by it. And so I really do believe in the hype cycle around Gen AI. Sorry for people who don't, but really it comes from a productivity perspective is where I believe it will really help us.
Yeah, I love that because, there are people saying it's going to eliminate jobs, but I just think it goes back to the data. We talked about it. We have so much more data. So if we can leverage that data to make sure that we are delivering on the right message, the right content, the relevancy, the right audience, if AI is going to help us do that piece of it, I am all in and all for it as well.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting maybe to sit in these same chairs 5-10 years from now and kind of see where we've landed from a Gen AI perspective. So I hope you'll have me back.
Yes, and I don't even think we'll have to wait 5 years, right? If we came back next year, this could be a totally different conversation, to your point, because everything is getting shrunk, because it moves so quickly and we have so much information, and it is just amazing how fast it explodes.
Fair point.
Yeah.
We don't have to wait 5 years.
Well, Tiffany, this has been amazing. I want to thank you so much. Any final words for our audiences? Again, you are our resident digital expert. Anything else you'd like to share before we sign off?
You've been so kind. The last parting words I'll have is let the consumer guide you.
Love that. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Community Powered Marketing Podcast. Make sure to hit subscribe on whichever platform you're listening on. And if you like this episode, please write a review and share it. This show exists to showcase how brands can unlock the sales, advocacy, and insights potential of their audience by incorporating community-powered marketing into their brand strategy. All right, that's a wrap. We can't wait to hang with you on the next episode.